latest Connected Conversations. Today we're going to talk about the PMO of the future. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Kerry Gregory, the PMO consultant, and Adrian Stallam, the Chief Change Officer here at S&S. So let's start with the basics. PMO, it's an acronym that most of us are very familiar with in the workplace. You know, we talk about it in relation to projects and programs and perhaps portfolio sometimes. I think sometimes I hear it used to the point where we sometimes forget what we're actually referring to. So what is a PMO in a business of today?
I would say that, I mean, you're right, that PMO in different organisations and sometimes even will have different meanings in the same organisation. It can either stand for Project Management Office, Programme Management Office, or Portfolio Management Office. But I do think that irrespective of what level the PMO is playing at, you are still really just trying to maximise that flow of work, make sure that value keeps getting delivered in the most stress-free way, but with a quality standard built in.
I agree.
What she said.
Yeah.
You might have more editing to do this one. I'm just going to warn you.
Yes, that's fine. That's a fairly factual answer from.
Yeah, so it's just a starting point.
The only thing I would say is, maximise the flow of value work. Yeah, but most don't. Most get in the way.
Yeah.
So you're already thinking about the PMO of the future.
Of the future.
I think you're talking about
PMO.
I'm saying, yeah. So I hear people
that's
asking,
a really good point.
What is a PMO?
Okay, so I would say that the cynical answer to that would be the PMO at the moment is really the process management police, the ivory tower sitting, command and control, standardised monitor, and shout at people really, and kind of ensure that people are named and shamed if they dare to deviate from a template or from the standard that you've sent down from on high.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I wanted to talk about that next in terms of the reputation of a typical PMO. You hear things like bureaucratic, it's slow, and it's seen as something that you have to get through rather than something that's adding value. Do you hear that as well, Adrian? Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think there's a huge variation, right? At its worst, they are, like say, process police, managing the process, sometimes getting in the way of delivery, rather than actually what they're supposed to be doing, which is helping deliver. At its best, they can be really fundamental partners of delivery and strategic partners as well for the organisation.
And
so there's a huge spectrum between those two.
For sure.
We've seen the best, we've seen the worst. I'd say at the moment it's a bit more still on the sort of process management, making sure the templates are in place, all that kind of stuff, lots of ticking of boxes, lots of spectating the car crash sometimes, and saying, hey, there's now 8 cars in the car crash, oh, here comes a 9th.
Told you that was going to happen.
Rather than trying to intervene and maybe stop the cars from crashing. So, I think there's a lot to play for in this space.
Yeah.
And I do think as well, though, that the people that I speak to in the PMO community, they do feel kind of restricted and constrained by that imposed parameter that they have to work within. I think there's a lot of people who are really passionate about helping delivery and about helping organisations to just be able to deliver better with less friction. However, it's the changing the mindset at the top of what the expectation of a PMO is in an organisation.
Yeah, everyone's trying to do their best, right, with the right intentions. Unfortunately, they're sometimes locked into a system where they can't be as effective as maybe they could be.
You talk about as effective as they could be. What would be? We're here to talk about PMO of the future. What does that PMO of the future look like? What does it look like when PMOs are performing brilliantly in an organisation? Yeah,
I think, but maybe where we need to go first is to understand what the constraints are and what the antithesis of that is first, right? What's common in portfolios today, right? So we work with lots of clients where they have gridlock. Pretty much gridlock in their portfolio. Lots of work going on. Everybody's busy. Not much getting done at the far end. And if it does get done, it's not necessarily the right thing or the most valuable thing. I've seen organisations where no one's actually seen the whole portfolio because it's in spreadsheets and emails and all sorts of places. So you can't actually see the whole thing and see if it's delivering against what your strategy is trying to deliver. I've seen lots of watermelon reporting where everyone knows that the project's red, but somehow by the time it's filtered up to the exec, it's turned green. So green on the outside, red on the inside. And I've even seen organisations where they're afraid to put their projects and programs red because of this fear of the consequence, which is senior management coming down from on high and sort of bashing the doors and giving everyone a bit of a whipping. And so that's probably the extreme worst of where it can be. They're not all like that by any stretch of the imagination. But let's whiz up to the other end. Let's whiz to the other end of the continuum.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to start talking about what that really value-focused organisation looks like.
And I think it's about redefining value within the organisation. Because to your point about, portfolios being in gridlock and stuff, that at the moment in a lot of organisations that are maybe at that other end of the spectrum you were just describing, they're measuring value by the amount of projects or programs they can start, the amount of things that get through that first, hurdle of being given the green light to go ahead. And what they're not looking at is how well they progress, whether they ever deliver, and if they do they deliver the value that it was meant to at the beginning. It's
a great question I always ask a PMO manager or director is how big is your portfolio?
Yeah.
And they give me an answer, usually in pound notes.
Yes.
And I go, is that the cost or the value of it?
Yes.
And I'd say 9 times out of 10 it's the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because it's something that people understand, right? It feels it's tangible, and they feel that they can latch on to that, and they understand that I have sacrificed, or I have committed this amount of money to do this project without thinking about, like you say, the value that project's actually going to unlock.
Well, it's much easier to measure as well, right?
Well, yes.
Because I have a pot of money here.
It is easy, but it's also the most fluctuating. So we all know the costs never come in on target.
That's very true.
Completely. When we look at the value of what we're delivering at the end, people quite often don't know where to start. I mean, I go to so many organisations where they just don't even try because they don't know what to do about
and
that.
That's
at least they can attempt to do the front end, how much money's going in, even if it fluctuates.
This is true. But I think a way to get around that, something that maybe on the face of it feels complex, but actually those kind of people that are used to dealing with tangible numbers and stuff can actually get their head around, is cost of delay. I think because it is still number focused, and there is still a kind of formula that you then use to determine that cost of delay. I think that's quite a good step in the right direction of getting people to think about actually what should our portfolio be made up of, what things should we be prioritising, and in what way. It feels like a stepping stone.
Yeah, so I think that big shift comes from a cost focus to a value focus. It comes from thinking about RAG statuses to more about flow of work in the portfolio. It comes from thinking about outputs or projects to very much more outcome based.
When you just to stop you there, what do you mean by flow? That sounds great. What does it actually mean?
Okay, so let's try and bring an analogy in, right? So let's take a motorway. So guys who design motorways are experts at flow management. You wouldn't think it sometimes, but actually, especially the smart motorways, what it used to happen before we had smart motorways was you could be going 70 miles an hour, and then suddenly everything comes to a standstill, and then go, and then stand still, and then go, and then there was no reason for it. It was a flow problem. What we quite often do with portfolios is we try and fill them up, right? So if you try and fill up a road, right, and get it 100% utilised, every single person is busy, then what do you get? You get a traffic jam, right? Because every single space on the motorway is full. Actually, what we do in smart motorways now, we know where those constriction points are coming. We actually start to limit speed going through them. We come down to 60, to 50, to 40, and then it speeds back up again. So we're trying to manage the flow of the cars through. You might also notice that on the slip roads, they've got traffic lights now. And they're the fastest traffic lights in the West. You get 3 cars through, and that's it, because they're trying to inject small batches of new cars on rather than 40 cars coming down the slip road at once, and it starts to hit backwards. So if you think about plumbers, you think about road designers, right? You think about town planners, they all understand flow. Unfortunately, in organisations, when we start to think about delivery, we don't consider flow. And quite often, to optimise the flow of delivery in an organisation, you have to do less to go faster.
Which feels counterintuitive.
It does feel really counterintuitive, and execs don't like that.
Yes.
No, not at all. They like people to be busy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, and most delivery systems are optimised for high busyness.
That's really it's a really important word. They like people to be busy. like because we're still measuring in that kind of presenteeism,
we measure
hours put in,
utilisation.
Time
utilisation.
sheets,
Is a project manager
85%
at
utilised.
90% utilisation
Yes.
as their target?
Yeah.
Well, let's get them to 90% and let's not worry too much about how busy or over
Yes.
have done it is in other areas.
And I think your road analogy as well, that kind of what we're really saying with that is you need to start thinking in a system design way, in a system thinking way, because everything is interconnected. So like say the reason that because someone makes a decision up here, you 15 cars back have to slow down to 40 miles an hour as a result of that. So it's about understanding all of the interrelations across the whole portfolio and the wider organisation and the impact they can have.
Yeah, quite often you're right. It's counterintuitive, or it's difficult for execs to go, well, hang on, I've got 120 projects in flight. What do you mean I need to cut that down?
Yeah.
Right? They're all important. Well, one, let's get serious about prioritisation. Prioritisation is difficult, but it's necessary. And quite often they'll say, well, okay, well, how far are we talking? I go, well, if you've got 120 today, I'm probably talking about halving it and then halving it again. But quite often what I'll do is I'll run a simulation with them. There's a good game. It's available online. You can just get it by Henrik Nyberg, called The Name Game, or the Multitasking Name Game. And it's the reason for using that is you can play it in about 20 minutes with execs, and they get it straight away, and they start to realise that what they've been doing by just running lots of projects in parallel or keep shoving stuff in the top of the hopper is making the whole thing slow down.
Yeah.
And when you can get that and you go, well, great, but you know, we're going to go down to maybe from 120 projects in flight to 30, but look how fast, look in that simulation, how fast those projects got done.
And I think this is the thing, isn't it? It's like, so you've got your 120 projects in flight at the moment, and they're all due to deliver in 18 months. We know there's going to be delays, so that's probably going to be at least 2 years, 2.5 years. If we stop some of those projects and just focus on a smaller amount, you will still get all of those projects done, probably in a shorter time scale.
Yeah.
You just won't start them all at the same time.
Yes.
You will stagger the start of them.
Yeah.
And but you're right, it's getting your head around it. And the name game's a really good one. And there's another one with just times tables as well. The 2, 3 and 4 times tables. Like if you get people to try and fill in the next number in each sequence, doing one from the 2s, one from the 3s, one from the 4s, it's much slower than if you say, right, do all of the 2s, then do all of the 3s, then do all of the 4s. And it's the same kind of theory that if you focus on less things, then you will be able to get more done.
Yeah.
You know, multitasking is a computer term, not a people term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the theory is quite easy to understand when you play those games, isn't it?
Yes.
And most times when people look at it, they go, I kind of know that.
Yeah.
This is too simple, I know that, but
that.
actually the point we're making is a far more important one, which is reduce the amount of change that you have going through in one go. But also that relates to the context switching piece as well. And everybody knows context switching is bad, and I do so much context switching. But actually the reality is when you're flipping from one project and you've got whole teams of people doing this, the wasted time until they get into that deep thinking space or that effective space again. It's literally wasted time for the organisation.
And it is reducing WIP or work in progress alongside great prioritisation, right? Based on value, because if you don't do that piece, then you might be working on the wrong things. And what that prompts you to do, if we're working on less things but they're the highest valuable things, is we can constantly keep that going. So there may be things that live and die in the list back there somewhere, where at the moment things live and die in delivery.
Yes.
Right? They get too late, then we go, should we just can it? Oh, it's too expensive, we can just can it. Well, actually, it will live and die before anyone's ever spent any money on it, because it was never valuable enough.
It was never going to do what people were saying it was going to do. And actually, I think one of the problems is we don't can them.
That's right.
We let them just like crawl off under a bush and die themselves.
Yeah.
Like we don't actually, and I think that's one of the really valuable things that a strategic PMO can bring to an organisation is to be able to keep challenging whether projects and programs that aren't going the way people anticipated they would should actually continue. Get rid of this, oh well, it's all sunk cost fallacy, so we have to carry on thing. And actually, you know, ask those challenging questions around, should we keep investing in this project? It's not just the money and the time you're investing in this project that we all know is dead, it just hasn't actually laid down and died yet, but it's stopping you starting something else that could be even more valuable.
Yeah. But that requires tough decisions.
It does.
And they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Especially if you've been the one who's said this is a project to do. We spent
Yeah.
50 million quid on it already.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's now way over cost, over its value, benefits realised, you know,
Yeah.
and someone's got to call it at some point. And
Yeah.
how many times have we seen a death march where people aren't allowed to call it,
Yes.
but everyone knows it's a dead duck?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
But I think that is, it's one of the really valuable things that a strategic PMO can bring to an organisation is asking those questions, because we're neutral to all programs and projects, right? We don't have pet projects or pet programs or pet business areas, departments. We have the organisation's best interests at heart all the time. So, you know, we can kind of challenge that factually, rather than people thinking that we have a vested interest in trying to get another project started or trying to get this project killed.
Yeah, you've got to be the independent people, haven't you? One of the things that I heard very much earlier was the transactional nature of PMOs when we were talking about, you know, when it's not performing so well, and now you're talking much more about, you know, strategic influence.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the behavioural side of what needs to change for PMOs to be effective in this space, and actually it would it's quite attractive from a talent perspective as well. If you're trying to bring somebody in to influence at a strategic level, how we invest and deliver change. You know, do you see people wanting to come into that space and quite energised by that?
I think over the last sort of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I think there's definitely more understanding that that's what PMO can be, and that's what you can try and work towards. So some of the people that it is now attracting from a talent perspective, people deciding they want to do this as their career, are just really exciting and very excited about what they can do. You know, you're not just only attracting those people who do want to lose themselves in spreadsheets and, you know, checklists and be able to feel a sense of control that is completely misguided. It is now attracting people who have like change management and behavioural backgrounds rather than just that operational transactional background. Definitely.
Yeah, I think you know, we've talked a bit about sort of the poor side of what we've seen in PMOs, but there's a huge opportunity, right? And that's what is the PMO of the future, because there is how many organisations have got this sort of gap between strategy and execution, right? There's a fundamental place and opportunity for PMOs to insert themselves in the right place with the right behaviours and the right kind of principles behind them that can be incredibly effective for the organisation, incredibly valuable for the organisation. And I think, you know, I talked at a couple of conferences over the summer for PMO, a couple of hundred people at PMO, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for continual improvement, right? So that's great.
It's in our nature.
Absolutely, exactly. But also a lot of focus on trying to bring new ideas into it. So there's an acceptance of we can be better than this. We can do more. But that's where the real opportunity is for the PMO of the future. There's this much more strategic link between these sort of high aspirations around strategy and how we execute, and then not only what we execute, but how we execute, because the way we execute in most organisations is pretty slow, quite dysfunctional, you know. And so if they take responsibility for looking up there and affecting down here, rather than a little viewpoint in the middle that goes, oh, I can see things happening, then there's huge amounts of potential to really add value to the organisation.
And I think that's the fun bit of the transactional operational side as well, is actually looking at and talking with people and influencing people to experiment and try things a little bit differently to make things better. Like, because you're never going to get away from the fact that there is always going to be a kind of day-to-day operational side to PMO, because, you know, we are there to ensure quality standards whilst trying to also support the strategic direction and vision of an organisation. But it just makes it much more interesting if you can repurpose it that way and think, right, okay, let's never accept what we've got. Let's always be looking to try and improve. You know, it's the a 100 tiny increments, like make you a lot faster. It doesn't have to be revolutionary all the time. Just be evolutionary.
So it sounds like it's a critical function for business of the future. We can see the potential. There's space for PMO to move into on a strategic level. How does an organisation even start to do that if it's at the other end of the scale, which we talked about earlier on? Where do they start in that continuous improvement journey?
Well, I think it all starts with purpose, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're in a system, if you've got a system set up to do one thing and you fundamentally want to change it, the best way to do that is to redefine its purpose, right? That's the most impactful way of doing it. And most PMO managers I've ever worked with, I quite often will ask them, what's the purpose of your department? And quite often they go, I've never been asked that before. I go, well, have a think, what is it? And they'll have a think and they'll just say some things, and it normally kind of comes up with sort of, to monitor, standardise and control. Those are kind of the words that tend to come out. Which, like you say, Kerry, puts them up potentially in their sort of, the commentator's box, away from the action. Yeah. We can mark down what's really happening and see things, but we can't intervene.
Yes.
And I think if we change that purpose, I've tested this with many execs and they do like it, which is, what if its purpose was not monitor, standardise, control, but was to maximise the flow of valuable work through the organisation? And most execs would go, oh God, yeah, actually, that's
It'd be great if we could do that.
Well, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And I go, great, well, okay, maximise flow of valuable work, 6 words. Do you know what work is truly valuable? Not really, right? Okay, if you did, do you measure flow in your portfolio? No, it's not optimised for flow. If you did, would you know how to maximise it? No, probably. Yeah. Okay, great. So we've got 6 words, and fundamentally we have no comprehension of how to do that.
How we're doing against those things.
Exactly. But by defining a new purpose, you can start to think about, well, if this is my new purpose, how on earth do I do everything I do?
Yeah.
Because it starts to reimagine what the PMO could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some really kind of small steps that you can take to start making people think differently as well, and like visualizing all of the work that is going on at the moment is so hugely powerful, because to your point, people don't generally know everything in their portfolio. Even if they think they know everything that their organisation is working on, there'll be this whole underground shadow network of things going on that are taking away time from people and are taking away focus from other things. So I think if you can actually get, just on a massive wall, a view of everything that's going on and everything that you want to start, it can really be a wake-up call for people sometimes, to actually, when they realise the amount of stuff they are trying to do. And there'll be projects and programmes that have been going on for like 18 months, 2.5 years, and everyone's kind of forgotten about them.
But they're still taking resources.
Exactly, and they're sort of like, why are we still doing that? Like, we don't need that anymore.
And if you can't do that, if you don't feel like I can do that as an organisation, that in itself is very, very telling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this kind of almost ruthless transparency is something that helps as well to make that shift. Let's kind of bring out our dead. Let's talk about how things really are and where we really are, and then look for those spots where we can start to do just small experiments to try and improve things.
And start to be driven by value rather than pet projects, and because we wanted to do it 12 months ago, we don't want to let go of it.
Yeah, I think there's a temptation in lots of organisations at the moment to measure the things that are easy to measure.
Yes.
So we measure people,
of course we do,
utilisation of people. Are you utilised a lot? That means I get my money's worth. Are we measuring cost? And we think that those two things, and maybe things like adherence to a plan, are a proxy for productivity, and they're just not. They're just really bad things to measure. If you measure the utilisation of people, you're measuring business, so you tend to get busy people, don't necessarily getting work done. Yeah. So one of those fundamental shifts is to start measuring work, and how is work flowing through from an idea to execution to value. And how quickly is that happening? Because what you might find is that some areas of the organisation, and this is one of the reasons for the sort of shift to agile, is that you get this sort of throughput and this constant cadence of value coming through that you might not be getting in other areas of the portfolio. You might go, well, why is that? Is it just the way of working? Is there some other kind of fundamental? So things that you measure are really important. We tend to measure people. We need to start measuring work getting done. Quite often we're relying on lagging metrics, the big KPIs, right? Yeah. They're pretty slow to turn. It's like turning an oil tanker, right? So what are the leading metrics that we can start to monitor that we believe will improve delivery? So and if we can start to monitor those and get the right things in place, then we'll have confidence that those lagging metrics will follow. Yeah. At the moment I see lots of lagging, not much on the leading metrics side.
I think things with lagging metrics as well, they're either they're telling you what you already know, right? So they're either telling you, like, the metrics are good, they're telling you that things are going well, which you knew, so then they just become vanity metrics, aren't we brilliant? Or they're telling you that things aren't going great and they're off track, which really, if you're honest, you already know. So that they're not really giving you any insight. It's like a comfort blanket of control that is this deep. Like, you know, it's like non-existent, really.
So there's some really quite practical ideas there that feel quite not easy. None of these things are easy, right?
No.
But things that are accessible.
They're easy to grasp.
Yeah, grab hold of. You know, first thing, understand your purpose and share that with the team. Get everybody to engage and believe in that, which is really critical. And the second one, visualise all the work, because that starts to drive a different kind of conversation. And then we talk about things. One of the things that we haven't talked about, I'd like you to just articulate what's your message to leaders. You mentioned earlier on, you know, some of the behaviours are driven from the top, and there are people in the teams really wanting to do more than just follow process and tick boxes. What are your messages, each of you, to leaders in your organisation in terms of why you should go on this journey?
Shall I start?
Go on then.
So I think the easiest way I can talk about is a particular client we worked with once, financial services organisation, and they had lots of problems in delivery. And you're right, the senior leaders were doing sometimes the wrong things. Just start another project, run it in parallel. What does that mean? You know, just keep shoving stuff in the hopper, not really working out if there's value. So there's an old lean term called walking the gemba, which means to go to the place where the work happens. And we were struggling to get these execs out of their office. So what we did is we did a video. We did a video of people in the organisation at the front line and said, what's stopping you doing a great job every day? And they were really honest, I mean, really brutally honest about some of the things, you know, things like, you know, I'm supposed to be doing sprints, and it takes me, if I request a test environment, it takes 6 weeks to set up, and then it's usually wrong, by the way. You know, so the other team that were setting up test environments weren't working well with engineering, all those other kind of things. And it was interesting, the video, because it was brutally honest, but when you played it in front of that team of execs, including the CEO, who thought it was great, there were a lot of people looking at their shoes afterwards. And I said, is this new news to you? You know, is this something you've never heard before?
Yeah.
Or is this, you know, is this something? And they went, no, we've heard all this. And I went, well, guys, this is happening on your watch, right? Those guys can't fix it. People in the front line cannot fix that problem. Yeah. You 2, 3 people, whatever, need to get together and fix the problem, fix the system for your teams. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because we asked them, they never really got together to try and fix things in the organisation before. Mm-hmm. They kind of worked in their silo. We realised then the silos start at director level. Yes. Right?
Yeah.
So I think,
and that's driven by the way
see where the work
performance managed. Right.
Yeah, lots of things that drive that. Yeah.
So go to where the work is. Yeah. Go and see what your teams are working on.
Yeah. And then go fix it with them. Yeah. And then you might have to get your peers together to go fix things for the team. Yeah. They can't fix those things on themselves.
Yeah. I think there are 2 kind of main things that I always try and say to exec leaders to get them excited about trying to go on this journey. And one is, there really are no limits to it. Like, you can draw the parameters around what you want the purpose and vision of your PMO to be, almost wherever you want them to be, dependent on, you know, the size, capability and ambition of the organisation. And you can start small and it can just keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger. They really can help, I believe, PMO really can help with every aspect of improving an organisation. Mm-hmm. And the second one is, be courageous. Like, you know, what's the worst that will happen if we just try X? And what could we gain if we could try it? And absolutely, seize those opportunities. Don't be boxed in by the way you've always done things before.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time today. Undoubtedly, the PMO has a critical role in the future, moving much more towards strategic influence and helping organisations maximise the flow of valuable work, to go back to a phrase that you said earlier. Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you.
Thanks.